Aye, shepherd's pie, greetings from the Philippines. I'm back in my echoey kitchen. Just like to thank people. I've had a few comments telling me how we can reduce the old echo in here, and I've taken it all on board. We got some rugs coming, and we're getting some more house plants. Hopefully it's not too bad. I started recording a few minutes ago with a microphone, but I don't know. I don't think it was any better. So I'm going back to the raw, just using the phone, see how that goes. But hopefully we can get past the echo. If we can't, well, you won't watch the video, will you? So anyway, just going to say from the start, this is something I've been thinking about for a while, but I want to be clear. The intention of this video is not to knock our American brothers. I'm not saying for 1 second that Americans aren't popular in the Philippines, because I've got no reason to believe that they're not. And I'm certainly not trying to wind people up. I know there are a couple of English vloggers over here who seem to have a problem with Americans, and they're always well, having a dig whenever they can. But this is not the purpose of this video. The reason I make videos and the reason I did this channel is I like to talk, and I like to, well, it's basically I just like to talk. And no one listens to me in my social circles, so I enjoy talking to the camera. But anyway, let me explain where I'm coming from with this. When I was in the Air Force many, many years ago, I did quite a few detachments with the American Air Force, and I was amazed how many American servicemen I met who were married to Filipinos. And they told me how they'd met them, all the bases there were over here. And I know America and the history with the Philippines, you know, is closer than any other country. I mean, obviously the Spanish were a long time ago, but I mean, the culture and everything over here, as soon as you get there, I mean, you see it's such a westernised country. I mean, they watch basketball, you know, eat hot dogs, eat burgers. I mean, it's like, you know, it is a very westernised, and I say Americanised country. Now, I've got no idea what the statistics are, but I am sure there are more Americans in the Philippines than any other nationality. Just because the links are so close, you know, over the years, the ties. I mean, there's VA hospitals in the Philippines. They used to have bases here. I think they've got bases again now. I mean, I don't keep abreast of things like that, but I'm pretty sure they've recently opened some bases, or they're gonna open some bases, and the new president has got very close links to America. But the point is, the cultures are very similar. I always had the impression when I was in Thailand, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are Americans in Thailand, of course there are, you get all nationalities in Thailand. But I never really associated the Philippines with Brits. I've been quite surprised how many British expats I've met over here. I always thought that, you know, the expats in the Philippines were predominantly Americans and Australians, and whereas in the Philippines it was, in Thailand it was mainly, you know, Scandinavians, British, etc. I've been quite surprised how many Brits I've met over here, how many Scandinavians I've met over here. I mean, it's a real mismatch. A lot of Americans, a lot of Australians. As I say, I would imagine that Americans are by far the majority. Might be wrong about that, but certainly Dumaguete, it's got to be Americans, you know, who are in the majority. And when you talk to Americans over here, they generally seem to love the place. You don't get many Americans, you know, knocking Dumaguete. You get some of the other, you know, nationalities being critical of Dumaguete. There weren't that many Americans in Sikio for some reason. I wouldn't say Americans are the majority over there, but they are certainly the majority in Dumaguete. I'm certain of that. And as I say, they love the place. They always say how fantastic the locals are and how wonderful Filipino people are. So the cultures are very close, they're very linked, Now, what confused me a bit more about this, I was talking to a friend of mine, an English guy, John, a few weeks ago. Now, John lives on a very tight budget. He's only got a state pension. Well, I did an interview with him for the channel a while ago, but fortunately the audio wasn't the best because he had a fan on. Anyway, it's a different story. But he was saying to me one night that he didn't like the Americans so much up in Valencia because when they went out for meals, they gave such big tips to the Filipinos. Because he said it made him feel bad. Because the UK, Europe, we're not really tipping nations, traditionally. I mean, don't get me wrong, you tip certain things, you'll give a tip in a restaurant, and, you'll tip the bin men and the postman at Christmas and that kind of thing. But we don't have the same tipping culture as they have in the States. In the States, you go in a bar, you'll tip every round. You don't tip in pubs in the UK. You might turn around and buy one of the bar staff a drink or something like that, but we don't traditionally tip. Whereas in America, it's a huge thing. It's like, I think 20% is probably the norm. That's what I was generally tipping when I was, in the States. So he was lamenting the fact that he'd go to a restaurant, Americans would be there, they would give a big tip, and he couldn't afford to give as big a tip, and that would make him feel a bit embarrassed, and he didn't like it. To which I said, yeah, well, Filipinos must love it though. I mean, it's, of course, big tips, why not? Yeah, so, given that the cultures are so similar, and the other thing, when you see Americans, interacting with Filipinos, they seem so natural at it. I mean, they literally dive in, because I know I'm generalising here, but your average Brit or your average European is a bit more reserved. Not in a good way, but tend to be a bit more drawn back than some Americans, not all Americans. But, Americans, I think, will tend to, I don't know how to say this now, but, they'll just engage in conversation with Filipinos more, good day to you, how are you, sir? And, they just have a bit of banter, a conversation, which is nice. Got no problem with that. But whenever I've seen those kinds of Americans interacting with Filipinos, the Filipinos seem very happy about it. Filipinos are very friendly, people. So I think it's nice. I'm not knocking any of that. But because of those factors, because of the similarity with the cultures, because of the tipping, because the vast majority of Americans I've met are so in love with the Philippines and don't say anything bad about it, you would think there was this really strong bond between Filipinos and Americans. And maybe there is. I'm not saying that there's not. But when I was in City Hall, what I did in the early months of the channel, when I interviewed Filipinos, I would ask them, as a standard answer, a standard question, if you could go to any country in the world, where would you want to go? Which country would you go to? And what's your favourite nationality? Now, when I started asking those questions in those interviews, I was 100% expecting them to say America. I was expecting the answer to be America every time that the women dreamt of going over to the States, the richest country in the world, and meeting an American guy, and that's where they go. Never once did I get an answer. Never once. And that got me thinking, that's a bit strange. And again, when I started the channel, when I was over in Singapore, I wasn't sure which direction to go with it. And one of the ideas I had was to vlog around and just basically ask backpackers and people, on the street, what their views were on certain things, where they'd been, their impressions of the Philippines, where they came from, how it compares to their country, etc. And I did that, or I tried to do that for a week or so, but it didn't work. There's a hell of a lot of editing involved, and it's just not easy to do, because you'll stop and you'll talk to someone and a bike will go by, or a car, or they'll bang a horn, and people, finding quiet, it wasn't working. I take my hat off, I really do tip my hat to any channels that are able to do that, because I think there's, what is it called, Living Abroad? He interviews people in shopping malls and he stops girls and things and expats and he asks the questions. And he seems to do it brilliantly. You know, there's no music on in the background, there's no like traffic and that going by. How the hell he does it, I do not know. But I know it's not easy, so power to him and anyone else who can do that with a channel, because it was, I gave up. Never published any of those videos. But doing it, not one Filipino I ever spoke to said that Americans were their favourite nationality, or America was the place they wanted to go. And because that was puzzling me and continues to puzzle me, I'd often, when I was out in bars at night or restaurants and things, I was just talking to Filipino friends, I'd talk to some of the bar staff and that, because I knew a lot of them. You know, Sikihor was a small place, so I knew people in most of the bars, and I'd say to them, like, you know, what's your favourite nationality? Which have you had? And of course, they're non-committal most of the time. I mean, no one wants, particularly on camera, no one wants to, if you're working in the hospitality trade, the last thing is you're going to say, I don't like this nation, I like this nation, etc., etc. But again, no one in the 8 months I've ever been here has said Americans and America. And I find that bizarre. But equally, no one has ever said they dislike Americans or they wouldn't want to go to America. It just has never been the first choice. And it's been quite a mixed bag of answers. But the one constant, the most popular in terms of places that Filipinos seem to want to go, is Japan. And that surprised me as well, because you'd say, like, well, really, Japan? I don't think anyone ever said the Japanese were their favourite, you know, tourists or whatever. I don't think there are many Japanese tourists in the Philippines. I can't recall seeing any. I mean, obviously there are some, but I don't think there's a lot. You know, there's a place where Japanese necessarily come in great numbers. But they'd say, yeah, Japan, because of the technology, because of the culture, because of the history. Anime seems to be a big thing. You know, am I saying it right? Anime, you know, the cartoon films. But yeah, it was, but other than Japan, was a mishmash. A mishmash. You know, there was no one culture. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying the Americans are not popular in the Philippines. What I'm saying is they don't seem to be the most popular. I say because, I mean, again, this is numbers off the top of my head, but I think when I asked in Sikihor, you know, 4 or 5 people said French. A couple said UK, some said Italy, couple said Australia. You know, there was no one answer in terms of, you know, favourite nationality. But in terms of countries, there were some quite obscure ones. Like Ellen's dream is to go to Switzerland. I mean, who would have thought that? Nothing against Switzerland. I mean, I'm not knocking it. I'm just surprised that if she could go to any country in the world, she'd go to Switzerland. I've had a couple in the last week I've talked to who said Norway. I said, what do you want to go to Norway for? Again, I've got nothing against Norway. Norway, great country, but they like the greenery. You know, they like the crystal clear lakes. They think it's like a beautiful country. And yeah, they are. They're nice countries. You know, I'm just surprised that that's, you know, where their choice would be. I mean, I was expecting, I don't know, well, America. I was expecting to say USA or, I don't know. I think I met a couple who said they'd like to go to Canada. Thailand, somewhere in Asia, you know, somewhere where it's beautiful, hot and sunny, you know, the Caribbean. Don't know why. I say I'm not going to give you any answers in this video. It's just something that has surprised me. Still can't really get my head around it. I mean, the Philippines is a poor country, let's face it. A lot of the people here are struggling to survive. You would expect, I would have thought, certainly, if there is a particular type of expat tourist who's tipping the most and is polite and is, you know, cordial, that they would be your favourites. Because I don't think, you know, the French or the British or the Dutch or the Italians would have necessarily been particularly, you know, flashing the cash on the tip fronts. Maybe it's because, and again, this is a difference as well. When you're talking in Sikihor, they were talking about tourists. because there isn't that big. There are expats obviously in City. I was one of them, but they're not. It's mainly backpackers. So maybe these tourists were like younger and they can relate to them. I don't know. You know, it's like it's a strange one. I'll be very interested to know what people think in the comments. And I don't want any anti-American, you know, bullshit, this and that. This video is not to knock Americans. I'm not for 1 second saying that Brits or Europeans are more popular in the Philippines than Americans at all. I'm just saying I'm very surprised that Americans aren't by far, you know, the most popular, you know, nation here for the reasons I've said. America has a huge influence on the culture over here, you know, in terms of the food, in terms of the sports, in terms of the, well, just everything really, you know, because of the bases, the amount of employment they brought here, you know. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's familiarity breeds content. I don't know. And again, I'm not saying probably the wrong expression, because I'm not saying there is any content. I'm just surprised, genuinely surprised. Because so many American servicemen seem to have met, you know, Filipino wives and partners. So many of the cities, you know, a lot of Filipinos, you read things, the economy suffered when the American bases closed. The fact that the bases are coming back seems to be a good thing for the Philippines. Yeah, strange one. I don't really have an opinion on it. Maybe you think I'm wrong. As I say, I'm not trying to be adversarial in this. I hope I don't lose any subscribers over this, because I know I've got quite a few American subscribers and I'm very grateful for the support. So I'm not knocking you at all. I could be wrong. I mean, when I say I spoke with lots of Filipinos, I haven't spoken to thousands. Maybe it's just the bars and the places I went to. It's just, yeah. I mean, I speak with 2 barmaids in the Kingswick the other day, and I was talking to the guy who works in the kitchen. The 2 women wanted to go to Norway. The guy who works in the kitchen wanted to go to Japan. You know, I didn't ask them what their favourite nationality was. I don't think I did. If I did, I can't remember. But yeah, I just imagined when I came to the Philippines, there would be this great clamber of Filipino women looking for American men who wanted a green card and wanted to go over to the States. Probably as well, the fact there's so many American vloggers, that also gave me, you know, the impression that there was a great bond. As I say, I think there probably is a great bond. You know, it's if you went into Scotland, well, no, I'm not going to go, because that's yeah. I'm not going to look at other examples in other countries, because then people will draw conclusions from, you know, where we come out, and that's not where I want to go. Yeah, posing a question: why aren't Americans more popular than they seem to be? Anyway, I'm not going to talk just for the sake of it. I've gone on and on here. Let me know what you think in the comments. Hopefully you liked the video. If you did, hit the subscribe button, smash the like button. Both of which will make me very happy. Particularly as my videos, I don't know what's going on, but the last couple of weeks, my view, I don't know if the algorithm has taken dislike to me, or you've all got fed up with my content, but my views and my likes and my subscriptions are going down, which is a worry. But there you go, hey ho. I'll end it now. All I'll say is the usual: whoever you are, whatever you're doing, stay safe, be lucky.